Hi, welcome back to the Sagebrush Coffee YouTube channel. I am here to talk a little bit about Geisha coffee today, but as you can see, I'm doing this from my home office. Normally we record these in the shop at the table there, but with everything that's going on these days, I thought it was easiest to just sit down in my office and record this video and talk a little bit about a coffee varietal that's coming up. What I want to talk about today is Geisha coffee. You may or may not have heard about this kind of coffee, and you may or may not have any clue of what Geisha is. So I hope today to talk a little bit about what a Geisha varietal is, what varietals are, a little bit about the history of the Geisha coffee, kind of how they got so popular, what it tastes like, and really answer the age-old question of, is really expensive coffee worth the money? And so that's what we're looking at. So let's start a little bit about the history of Geisha coffee. I think a lot of you people know that most coffee comes from a tree. The tree is the Arabica tree. And then there's a bunch of different branches off of that create your coffee varietals. And so you may have a bourbon varietal, you may have an heirloom from Ethiopia. And if you think about it, that's similar to like apples. And so you've got Fiji apples, Red Delicious. I'm not really an apple aficionado, but I know when I go there, I always have to ask my wife which ones are the good ones, and then we grab those. Coffee is very similar, where there's a completely different flavor profile within the varietals of the Arabica plant. There's also the Robusta plant, but we won't talk about that. It's a genetically modified plant that's just terrible, and so we don't really have anything to do with that here at Sagebrush. And so the varietal, the Geisha varietal, is one of those. It's really rare, although it's getting a lot less rare than it was even 5 years ago when we offered it for the first time. Some of the top ones have been known to go for over $1,000 a pound unroasted, and your yield is about 85%. So you're talking like somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,100, $1,200 a pound roasted coffee. It's crazy. It's crazy what they go for. And so what is it? What makes it so expensive? What makes it so valuable? So to know that, you kind of have to back up. Geisha plant is actually a hybrid varietal of an Ethiopian Arabica plant that came out several hundred years ago. It started growing at the base of the Geisha mountain in Ethiopia. That's where it gets its name. It has nothing to do with anything that you normally associate the word geisha with. It began to grow at the base of the Geisha mountain. And somewhere in the 50s, it was brought into Costa Rica. And it kind of worked its way around Latin America to where in, I believe, it was like late 90s, early 2000s, the Hacienda Esmeralda first kind of played with this varietal again. It wasn't very popular early on. And whatever they did at that farm, in 2004, it won Best of Panama and just destroyed. And it was so good, and people were blown away, and everyone wanted to get the hands on this new varietal that was really an old varietal, but it was new on the scene, and it was Geisha. And so by 2018, it was already going for $800 a pound. I've seen cups of Geisha coffee go for over $100 a cup. What is it that makes it so popular, so great? It's an incredibly complex cup of coffee for a Latin American coffee. You see complex coffees all over, like a great Yurga in Ethiopia, or Kenyan coffees, or Tanzanian coffees, are all very complex cups where there's a lot of things going on with them, and maybe every cup is a little bit different, or every sip is a little bit different, or at every temperature level it tastes just a little bit different, and it's just really impressive. Geisha is a lot like that, which is very rare out of Latin America, and so you get some of what makes Latin American coffee great, but it's way more complex. It's also more floral. It's almost tea-like. It tastes kind of like a green tea, or like what green tea is to black tea. Geisha is to most of your other Latin American coffees. It's also tends to have kind of an understated kind of tropical fruit tone to it. I think a lot of times people associate mangoes because it's the most common tropical fruit in the US, but I've picked up some papaya and I've picked up some other flavors in it, really depending on which one it is. So we get to the $1,000 question, $800 question, $110 a cup question. Is Geisha coffee really worth the money? frankly, I've never had $1,000 a pound cup of geisha. Normally the samples I get, I think last time we offered geisha, we sold it for around $80, an 8-ounce bag. I have some geisha right now that we'll be launching here shortly that we're gonna sell for about $100 an 8-ounce bag. So it's not anywhere near the $1,000 a cup coffee or $1,000 a pound coffee, and it's amazing. But is it worth it? That's kind of up to you. Is a $150 bottle of wine worth it? To some people, that's all that they can drink. To other people, I can't imagine drinking something different, something that much more. Although when I drink a $150 bottle of wine, I get it. I can go after it. But my typical bottle of wine is $15 to $20 because that's the price point that I'm comfortable with. If I sat there and had a $100 bottle of wine and a $15 or $100 glass of wine and a $15 glass of wine, could I palate the difference and say, yes, that's absolutely worth 8 times more? Probably not. But I'm going to go grab a $100 glass of wine here and there because it's just phenomenal. And that's basically how geisha falls out. I actually think every day you look at our Ethiopian Bombay, you look at the Kenyan coffee we have right now, that Yemen coffee that we just went through, those coffees are like 1/4 the price or 1/5 the price of the geisha. But there is something unique about a geisha cup of coffee. That smooth flavor, that tea-like mouthfeel, it just doesn't compare to anything else I've ever had. And so at the end of the day, if you want to experience that, you just have to pay for it. We were lucky enough this year to be able to get some that was a little bit lower price point than a lot of the geishas out there. Frankly, $100 an 8-ounce bag is not an astronomical fee for geisha. I think the last time this particular coffee was sold in the US, I saw it at something like $30 a cup. So that works out to like $300 a pound. And so we're not out of line for that price point. But for an everyday cup of coffee, you got to just make that call. Just to tell you a little bit about what I like to pick for a geisha, because it's tea-like, because it's tropical, and has that kind of fruit on the front side of the palate, I really like dry process geishas. I think that puts on display a little bit better about what's in there, which kind of counteracts what I've talked about and said with respect to dry process versus wet process or natural versus washed coffees. I think washed coffees generally put on display what the origin and what the coffee really is, and a natural coffee tends to be more fruit forward regardless of origin. I think geishas actually perform better in my mind as a natural process, light roast coffee that is just crazy smooth. As you keep your eye out on our website, we generally have a geisha maybe once a year, once every other year. I try to buy enough to last 3 to 6 months. We have one, at the time of posting this blog, we have one coming up. Just keep your eye out and we'll get it. And go ahead and click subscribe below. That'll help us be able to utilize our YouTube channel a little bit better and help you keep informed as I'm posting new ones. I'm trying to post a blog every couple of weeks, and so this is the latest one, and go ahead and sign up and subscribe. Thanks.